Hello again and welcome back to Shadowboxing. Today's guest is Joe, who is a real shadowboxer because he has got an idea which someone have to make into practice, and some people don't maybe like that, and maybe the politicians don't like that, but Joe,
they don't like it.
The politicians don't like real democracy. That's what we think.
They don't want democracy.
We don't know because no one tried before in Australia.
No,
or what happened?
Sorry, it has been tried in Australia.
Tell me, when was that?
This is one of these little secrets in Australian history, but I did a little bit of research and I discovered a couple of years ago, that at the first federal conference held in March and April of 1891 in Sydney, the then Attorney General of South Australia, a man called Kingston, Charles Kingston, actually wrote a draft constitution for Australia.
Yes, that was the first draft constitution?
The first draft constitution. He went to Sydney and he presented that constitution, not to the actual convention, but to a drafting committee.
Yes.
And that drafting committee went out on a boat up the Hawkesbury River.
And they killed the man.
And they deleted his clause to make us like Switzerland is today. And it has, as
do you
I
know
say,
why it's happened?
This is one of the mysteries of Australian politics. I have offered friends lots of friends, $100 bottle of champagne if they can tell me.
And
nobody can tell me. I rang some years ago the former Premier of South Australia, John Bannon. You may have heard of him.
yes.
And because John Bannon is a great admirer of Kingston. He's written a thesis on him, a doctoral thesis.
That's very good.
And I said, John, where can I have a look at some archival documents on Kingston, because you've written a thesis on him, that will tell me why that clause in the Constitution that he wrote and made Australia a democracy vanished. He said to me, you'll never find out, because Mr. Kingston was a womanizer.
Oh.
He had lots of girlfriends in Adelaide. And when he died in 1908, his wife got all his papers and burnt them up. So she's done us a great disservice. We will never know where he got the idea and what happened on this boat up the Hawkesbury River.
Absolutely.
Now, what in fact happened, the story gets more interesting, because over the 1890s in the United States of America, what happened, something very important happened in America. In the late 1880s, a journalist called James William Sullivan, a man born in Pennsylvania. I've actually seen his grave.
Yes.
I've actually found it in a town called Carlisle. He's a great man. He's the man who brought democracy to the United States. His biography hasn't been written. I'm writing it.
Oh, good.
Yes. Anyway, Sullivan, in 1888 or 1889, got on a boat, I think in Philadelphia, went to Italy and got on a train and went up to Switzerland. And he travelled all over this little mountain country with notebooks like journalists work, and he interviewed politicians, people in local government, cantonal leaders, and he wrote a book called Direct Legislation by the Citizenry.
That sounds good. The title is good.
Initiative and Referendum, to initiate legislation. That book was a bestseller right through the 1890s, right across the United States. And what happened was that by 1918, half the states of the United States had adopted Swiss-style, with modifications,
Yes.
Swiss-style democracy. Now, the next important step in relation to us, we Australians who aren't democracies, aren't treated like sovereigns, but treated like subjects. What happened here was that the people that were responsible for this in the United States, they were called the progressives. It was a political movement
yes.
right across the United States. And the progressives, their literature actually crept into Australia, mainly through the union movement and what became the Australian Labor Party. And the Australian Labor Party adopted initiative and referendum as its national policy.
And what's happened?
Never implemented.
Why is that?
Because our politicians are reactionaries. They don't want to share power with the people.
That's not new.
They are anti-democrats.
But they're saying they are democratic.
I repeat, just because your mother and father, your teachers, the newspapers and politicians say we're a democracy doesn't make us one. Look, you know the old saying, Tibor, no matter who you vote for, a politician always wins. That quote is actually not quite correct.
Yes.
It's got to be slightly modified.
Such as?
To, no matter who you vote for, the politicians, not the people, always win. And that's us.
It's like the casino, by the sound of it.
It's a stacked deck of cards. Whoever we vote for, the politicians always win, and the people never win.
So, Joe, if we get into this stage now, we understand how real democracy can work.
Yes.
And we got more than 100 years of experience in the world in a very, very respectable country like Switzerland.
Yes, longer than 100 years.
Longer than 100 years. So now, what can we do in here, in Australia, to make this country democratic and give back the people the rights that they never got to govern this country and contribute and control the laws in the country and the law of the land?
Well, Tibor, I'm doing as much as I can by writing about it. I write about this fairly regularly in West Australian Business News in my column. But what people don't realise is it's what they call a catch-22 situation.
Yes.
Because to make this the law, politicians have to do it, and they're all against it. Do you know that Australia got the idea of the referendum? We have referendums. We've had about 40 since 1901.
But that's initiated by the government.
It's initiated by politicians. Again, see, Australian politicians are very, very greedy people. They've got this power that was given to them in an undemocratic constitution, and they never, ever intend giving it away. So we've got a real problem.
But Joe, I just heard good news coming, not with the Bible only, but with some politician as well. Some independent politician in our federal government who is called himself democratic.
Yes.
He just about initiating 2 plain law changes or introduction of 2 legislations.
One man.
So what's
the man you're talking about?
Is it good news or not?
It is very good news, but I think the end of the story is going to be very sad, as it's always been. There have been earlier attempts to bring it in. The Australian Democrats attempted to bring it in at the Senate level, where they were represented. It was killed. There have been many attempts at the state level. Do you know that in Western Australia in 1912, the Scadden Labor government brought in a bill to make West Australia a true democracy, and it was quashed.
What was the year?
1912.
1912.
John Scadden. Happy Jack Scadden was his nickname.
Was he drunk, or what's happened to
No,
this
he
guy?
was a Labor man. It was in his platform. He and his Attorney General, a man called Thomas Walker, brought... I've got a copy of their bill, but it never became the law of the state.
So they wanted to introduce democracy, real democracy in Western Australia.
The Labor Party did.
The Labor. And that's never eventuated.
It didn't happen. It started in 1912 and it ended in 1912. But going back to what's happening in Canberra at the moment, a Victorian Democratic Labor Party senator, Senator John Madigan, he has drawn up 2 bills to give people the right to initiate changes to the Constitution by getting signatures, and also to bring on plebiscites, that is, to initiate legislation. But please keep in mind, the Liberal Party, the National Party, the Labor Party, and I suspect the Green Party, they will all send it off to a committee and then quietly refuse to allow it to be debated. And even if it's debated, there'll only be one person for it. He won't get a seconder for the motion. and it'll die.
So it couldn't go into
They
even
will
the
never-
voting stage.
Our politicians are reactionary, anti-democratic people. Every single one of them, except Senator John Madigan.
So, John, if this is the catastrophic situation we are in,
It is.
have we got ever any chance, or how can we engineer the change and introduction of real democracy in this country? If the politicians can block it, and they can block it only,
Yes.
we could not say, let's go for it, because we not have the rights, it's denied from us. So what can we do?
I have to be realistic. I think Australia is now stuck forever.
You think so?
Yes, with being
That
a ballot.
pessimistic?
Yes. Well, I think it's realistic. I cannot see it ever happening.
So the people, they don't care.
Well, some care, but not enough care.
But even if we got, 2 million people signing petitions, no one need to take notice of that.
Politicians in Australia do not have to take notice of petitions. Parliament has, every time Parliament opens, they read petitions. Each MP, politician gets up and says, 150 of my constituents have signed that they want the road from such and such widened, that they want this done, that they want that done. And they just read out, and these things are tabled, and they are tabled, well, they're never seen again.
So what's happening with these papers or the petitions?
The petitions are just filed away somewhere in a dungeon and never looked at again. Sometimes a minister might look at it and write a letter to the secretary of the petition and say, look, we can't do it for this reason. Sometimes the idea gets through, but very little, there's never a vote, because the people do not have the right
to vote.
to bring on a vote.
Thanks, Joe. And I hope you learned something from our discussion. And don't forget to watch next week, Shadowboxing, same channel, same time. Thank you.